So what is this talk about? So my name is Hadi. I work at JetBrains. You've heard of JetBrains? This is the amount of marketing I do, my t-shirt. And I don't do DevOps. Which is kind of like, what the hell am I doing here, right? I don't know. That's a good question. Should ask the organizers. They wanted me to give a talk a little bit about how we work at JetBrains, the company, and a little bit like the goods and bads, and well, there's no bads, I shouldn't say the word bads. The goods and the less goods of working at the way that we work at JetBrains. So I'm going to give you a little bit of history of where JetBrains came from, and then I'll explain a little bit how we work and the conveniences and inconveniences that these have. Is there anyone from JetBrains in the crowd, by the way? Okay. So if I'm saying anything that's a lie, just be quiet. So it was founded by 3 people in the Czech Republic. How many of you here remember this company called Borland? Right? Borland was a company that was a really cool company, and then it renamed itself to another company called InPrize, and it basically died. And then it resuscitated, and then it went and threw itself off a bridge, and then it came back, and then now it belongs to some other company, Embarcadero Technologies. It used to be a cool company, and one of the companies that they actually bought at the time was Togethersoft. And the 3 founders of JetBrains used to work at Togethersoft, and when that merger happened, they kind of left and they started their own thing. And they started creating a tool to rename things in Java. It was called Renamer. Which is now called IntelliJ IDEA. So it started around 20 years ago exactly. So we've grown. I joined in 2010. It was about 150 people when I joined, and for me it was just like already a big company. And now we're over 1,000, nearly 1,200, if not more. We are hiring. I was told to put this slide in. We are hiring. This is where the office is. It's about 47 minutes with traffic from here. And so what is different a little bit about JetBrains, and looking a little bit more at your typical company. You normally have a bunch of things in companies. You have organizational hierarchies, you have working hours, you have communications generally we have communications, and you normally have strict areas of responsibility. And these are kind of barriers that a lot of people always think are preventing them from doing things, right? There's a lot of bureaucracy. I can't do anything because there's a lot of bureaucracy. I can't do anything because it's not my responsibility, or I don't have a right to do something, etc., etc., etc. We kind of don't have these things at JetBrains. So the idea is, does it actually work or does it not work? And how has it evolved going from a company of 3 people to 100 to 1,200? So first and foremost, we don't really have this idea of a traditional hierarchy at JetBrains. And when I mean traditional hierarchy, it doesn't mean that we don't have like managers and team leads. We kind of do now. We essentially have, you have team members and then you have team leads, and that's it. And then you break up these team leads into other little teams, etc. And we have a whole bunch of different teams which you could think of as individual little companies inside JetBrains. So you have like the IntelliJ team, you have the PHP Storm team, you have ReSharper team, and then you have cross-cutting teams such as the web development team or the developer advocates, which is the team I'm on, that kind of cover multiple products. But each of these smaller teams each have their own QA, they have their own marketing, they have their own devs, they have everything. There's very little that, like, there isn't really a case where one member of a team is working on multiple products at the same time, unless it's on the IntelliJ platform, for example, so to speak. But the point about the hierarchy is more around, like, the authority that each people have. And everyone basically has a voice, and everyone has the authority to talk to whoever you want. You can talk, there is no, I can't approach the CEO because they're the CEO. It's absolutely fine, and it's actually encouraged to contradict the CEO in public or in private or whoever. In any case, it's absolutely fine and it's encouraged. In terms of rules and regulations, we don't really have much. In essence, the idea is that you work whenever you want, you work on what you want, and you get stuff done. Okay? That's simple. So looking at it like that, it feels like absolutely paradise. Like, why would I not want to? It's amazing, right? You can work on what you want, work whenever you want, and just get stuff done. And I'm not going to go into the definition of what done means, because that depends on the person. But obviously, it's not quite that, because if it was, I wouldn't be giving this talk. So some things work, other things would say more challenging, or don't work quite as you would think that they would work. But let's look at the positives. Like, what are in terms of the working hours? There's really, the rules of engagement there is that essentially be there for meetings if you can. And if you work in our office in Munich, which is, we've got, I think the second largest office we have right now is in Munich with about 200 people. It's physically closed on Sundays. You're not allowed to go. It's illegal to the point that the director can be imprisoned if you go to the office, right? It's Germany. They love rules, Let's tell a joke about Germany, but first we'll talk about the rules of the joke. So that's basically the thing, right? So what are the benefits? No, absolutely all of them. Your kid is sick, great. You need to do paperwork, fantastic. You can't come in for whatever reason, it's absolutely fine. Does it work? It absolutely does work. There really isn't an issue. And in fact, traditionally in Russia, people used to come to work in the St. Petersburg office, people used to come to work at around 11:30 in the morning, 12. Which was like, for me, was crazy. When I first came to the office here, the first time, I'm like, I walk in at 8 a.m., expecting to meet everyone, and no one's there. No one want to come until 12. That radically changed. It completely and utterly changed a few years ago to now people coming in at 8:30 in the morning. Why? We started to serve breakfast. Literally, that was the reason. Okay? You put some fried eggs and people come early. It's that simple. And if you put bacon, they'll even come sooner. So, does it work? Yes, absolutely fine. We talk about the meetings, and meetings is a funny thing, because generally, like, how many of you like meetings? Okay, I always wonder, like, what is the overlap between people that like meetings and people that like JavaScript? Wonder if there's any relationship there. It doesn't make any sense, but normally when you talk about meetings, these are the top titles that you find on Hacker News, right? Boring meetings, or sorry, in Russia it would be hubba hubba, right? Boring meetings should die, 9 reasons meetings suck, meetings kills your soul. And it's true, like, meetings can be very, 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 very exhausting. And bad meetings can be very, very, very bad. So some of the things that we've tried to do with less or more success is, first and foremost, always think about the meeting purpose. What is the meeting purpose, which normally, generally, is categorized into either if it's a coordination meeting or a status update. The coordination that we want to coordinate something that we want to work on, or coordinate a decision we want to make, or is it a status update? And you have to often think hard about this, right? And if it's a coordination, try and kind of have a single topic, action items. Talk about what is my action item after this meeting. This is an exercise that I do myself. It's like, if I'm going to have a meeting, what action items am I going to walk away from? Like, what is the action item that I'm going to walk out of the meeting from? And if there isn't one, then maybe I shouldn't even have the bloody meeting, right? Maybe just an email will be enough. Then there's the aspect of the stand-ups, right? And before I show you the next slide, how many of you do stand-ups? And how many of you love doing stand-ups? Okay, so that's fine. So I'm not a big fan of stand-ups, and this is my own opinion, right? I actually, it's funny, because like today, this week I'm in the office, and I was participating in stand-ups, and the stand-ups were essentially 300 people around the room, okay, a slight exaggeration, and everyone was like this. with their phones until it was their turn. I asked this question on Twitter as well. I was surprised I got that number of votes. And this is the results. How do you like stand-ups the way they're done now? And 33% said they're extremely valuable, 42% said they're really good idea, bad implementation, and 26% said they're a waste of time. So the question is, what is the purpose of exactly a stand-up? What exactly are they about? Is it about status updates? Is it sharing updates? It's like, I was working on this today. How many of you pay attention to everything that everyone was working on that day? No? You basically kind of like tune out. Oh, you're a good person. Basically, they tune out until it's your turn, and then you start to say what you're working about. Some people talk about stand-ups being about trust, right? It's about commitment to the team. Yesterday, you said, I'm working on a bug, and today you should have fixed that bug. And if you haven't, everyone's going to remember that you've been working on that bug for 2 days. So what is it? Is it putting you on the stage of saying, why haven't you finished working on this X or Y? Or is it about raising awareness, right? Or people talk about, is it about communication? Like, stand-ups, I've often heard people say that stand-ups are a very, very good way to encourage teams to communicate with each other, right? There's equivalent to, there's a very short way of saying that. We normally call it bullshit in English. Because if your communication within a team is limited to 15 or 20 minutes of people talking to each other, there's not much communication going on. And they say, no, but it encourages it. And it encourages people to talk about things or problems they're having. You've got a team. You can approach a person about a problem you're having and try to solve it. Having said that, in JetBrains, we're very good at stand-ups. We do quite a bit. I don't. Our team doesn't. We use other alternatives to stand-up. We use, for example, tracking tools, like us in particular, and I say us, Anton and I, we have a tool that we send a message to Slack, and then Slack sends it to a Confluence page, and then we never see it again, because that's what Confluence is, a black hole. But it's there in case anyone wants to read it, right? But we try and read it to basically kind of get an idea of, and we do this on a weekly basis, to kind of get an idea of what is going on, because that is actually a very big problem when it comes to the company size and as it grows, which is communication, right? This graph is literally very, very true. As the company grows, it's becoming harder and harder for many things to happen, and that is because of a lack of proper communication. And this comes with a bunch of challenges. First of all, there's the aspect of who's who. Like, who does what? Especially in a company like JetBrains, where you can basically do anything you want. Like, if you hire a developer, first and foremost, everyone at JetBrains has the 20% project, okay? Less successful or more successful, some people actually work 20% of their time on their own project, and that could be cross-boundary, it could be anything. If you're a developer, you could do 20% time marketing. If you're marketing, you can do 20% time development. It doesn't matter. You don't have to really ask for permission. You don't have to say what you're working on. You can just do whatever you want. And even as part of your job, if you want to go out of your field, you can essentially do that. So there's this problem like who's who, who's doing what? Who does this particular thing? Right? Are two people actually working on the same thing? And this has happened so many times to us, so many times. One time I was there a few years ago, and remember, I work remotely, so I'm not even in the offices, right? So I'm there, and there's a guy, and this wasn't even before we had the 2 towers, right? It was just one tower. There's a guy on one floor working on a plugin to make you use better one of our tools. And there's another guy on another floor working on a plugin to make you use better some of our tools. Basically working on the exact same thing, and one isn't aware that the other one is working on the exact same thing, right? And this happens more often than you think, because people have this freedom to kind of work on whatever they want. They don't really have to communicate it with anyone, and we end up in this situation where you can kind of feel like we're duplicating efforts. So we try and create kind of like communication channels. But the problem with the communication channels is that how do you communicate with people so that it doesn't end up being ineffective? Do you do a push mechanism of communication or do you do a pull mechanism? And these, I don't know if you're familiar with these terms, but I kind of made it up for this context, but it's very, very simple. Push, do I push information out to people? Or pull, do I put information somewhere and tell people, if you want it, pull that information down? And this is, like, it sounds really simple, but it's not, right? Confluence again, and I'm not picking on Confluence because Confluence, you can talk about any wiki, anything. There are a lot of challenges with this because if you put a whole bunch of information on a page, whether it's your knowledge base or whatever, it gets lost. And then it gets outdated. And then you don't even find it yourself. I have written things that I've put on Confluence that I have forgotten that I have written, and 4 years later, I've started to write the same thing. It becomes quite challenging. And you've got to then balance it between the push and the pull, because if you end up pushing too much information to people, what happens? You end up basically creating a lot of noise, and people don't enjoy that. So we use some tools, like all of the people in the world that use tools. Email. Sure, email. Who loves email? I actually do love email. I'm not saying this. But yeah, I like email. Now, a few years ago, there was a company that came out and they said, we're going to help the problem that you have with email. The company was called Slack, right? And they said, we're going to get rid of all your email, and instead we're going to give you 6,000 notifications, right? So now you end up in this situation where everyone is pinging you about everything, like literally everything. And it's ended up, like I was saying, you know, I actually wrote a blog post a few months ago that I said that Slack has created a false sense of urgency for people. You know, if you want something from someone, you just ping them on Slack and say, hey, it's not urgent, but when you have time and the person is like doing something, they have to look, and then they're like, okay, it's not urgent. When I have time, okay, I'll get back to it. Right? And then you start to think, why haven't they gotten back to me? Let me send them an email. Hey, did you see my Slack? Yes. Right? Oh, maybe I said something that they didn't like. It's created this sense that everything can just be continuously pinged, right? I was actually saying, and you know, there's various methods that you can do to try and avoid this situation, like, you know, maybe, I don't know, use email once in a while, or not ping everyone on Slack about everything. So I wrote this blog post, and then there was a few people saying, oh, apparently Hadi is telling everyone that they shouldn't ping him on Slack. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying, but to think a little bit about how you communicate with people. So we've gone from email to continuous interruptions, right? But Slack also has some of the benefits, of course. Like, I'm not saying that Slack is bad. Like, we've got 1,000 people on Slack, and we've got, I think, around 25,750 channels last time I counted. And someone normally doesn't look for a channel. We've created a new channel that's called Who. Like, literally, it's a channel called Who. Because we have a very, very strict rule at JetBrains. You know the general channel on Slack? Don't use it. If you use it for the wrong purpose, oh my God. So we created another channel that was called Who, that you can just go there and ask if you're not familiar with a specific purpose or a specific process or who does what. And it's been really, really useful. But now it's become to that point that people don't even search for channels anymore. They just go to Who and say, hey, who's going to help me with IntelliJ IDEA? I don't know, maybe look for a channel called IntelliJ IDEA and go there, right? But having said that, it has become very useful. So if you are using Slack, if you don't do something like this, I would highly recommend you do it, because it helps people and it encourages people to find out about things. And the good thing is it's crowdsourced, right? As new people join, they help onboard, the older people help onboard newer people. The other thing that we use very, very extensively at JetBrains is our issue tracker. This is called UTrack. I don't care what you use, whether it's Jira or whatever. But the good thing that we found with this, and when I say we use this heavily, we use it for booking travel, for invoice payments, for bug tracking, for absolutely everything. And the good thing about this is that it is way better than email threads. Because let's say that you want to make a decision around something. Instead of sending 5 emails and then now understanding that there needs a 6th person to be involved and you have to add that person to the thread, with UTrack, we just create an issue about a discussion. And then people can join and leave the discussion as they want. And when they join, they can see the entire thread history. You don't lose people in this big email threads. So this has proved way more useful for us than just having constant email threads. And I'm saying UTrack, use whatever you want, but start to consider maybe using your issue tracker for more than just tracking issues. It's very good to hop on, hop off, stop receiving notifications about a specific topic. We also have an internal newsletter, like I'm sure many of you do. The region that this actually started was because we've got people that cover multiple technology, and it was a little bit about raising awareness of everything that's going on in the industry. We also share financial information with everyone on a monthly basis. So we talk about the sales, how they're going, we talk about some of our top customers. All of this is openly shared inside the company. We also have an internal conference, like probably many of you do. And initially this internal conference was, we're a tech company. There's 600 people, 700 people that are developers or in tech. We're going to do an internal conference about technology, right? And people started to say, no, actually, we don't want the technology. We want other types of talks. So we started to move to other types of talks. And then we said, well, you know what? We're going to do these other things called Technical Wednesdays, which are kind of like your brown box lunches, where you start to talk about technical stuff. And then we started to get people, for example, from marketing saying, hey, can we come and give a talk? And we're like, sure you can. And they're like, but it's not technical. And we're like, it's okay. It doesn't mean that it has to be technical, but it's called Technical Wednesdays. So we just rename that to Wednesdays so that they don't get confused. And then there's the topic of management. And I said that we're not very hierarchical, and I'm sure that many of you have seen this tweet, which is kind of accurate in many senses, right? So do we have that level of stuff at JetBrains? No, fortunately we do not. So do we have management? Well, I don't know. It depends on what you understand by management. If you talk about management as micromanagement, no, we do not. We don't track what people do. We're not a company of KPIs or OKRs. We're not. We don't track individual progress by some artificial numbers that you're setting yourself for. We don't do any kind of micro-reporting. We don't do any kind of permissions. You want to work on something, you essentially can work on something without having to worry about asking for permission or not asking for permission. So we try and work on what we call objectives. So we set a series of goals, and we provide guidance for those goals, and we try and remove obstacles. And that's basically the job of what a team lead should essentially be doing, right? Providing some goals, providing guidance, and then removing for obstacles. But I would say that more than that, it's about caring for the people, giving them the freedom, and trusting them. Now this looks really, really nice on a slide, doesn't it? I mean, I've used the best words out there, like care, freedom, trust. These are big words, right? This is like things that you would hear in a TED Talk. Right? It's like, oh my God, this is so important. This is so profound. Yes, but you know what? This is so nice to put on a slide, but it's often so difficult to implement. Right? Because these things aren't simple. Caring is so easy to say. Have you ever met a manager that openly has said, I manage 12 people and I don't give a shit about them? Have you? You have, okay. Let's have I'll buy you a drink later. Right? You normally don't. Managers say, oh, I care for my people. But what is the level of care? How much do you actually care for a person? How much is that level of caring? Do you care when they have a personal problem? Do you care about their issues outside of work? And the only way you can do that is what? Getting to know the person. So now you have to end up in a situation where you need to start understanding that person and knowing that person on an individual level. There's a lot of people that have this idea that you should not establish any kind of personal relationship with your colleagues. And I'm not talking about partner relationship, but I'm just talking about, friendship, etc. No, work is work, my life is my life. That's great. But then how can you care for someone if you don't have a personal bond, if you don't have a personal relationship with them? You don't. So you can't, from one side say, I care for people, from the other side say, I don't really want to have a personal relationship with this person. The only way you actually start to care for people is if you start to have a very close personal relationship with them. And that's not always easy, right? Because there are times when there's a conflict, there are times when you just don't get along with the person, but it's also quite demanding that you need to work these relationships. Now, in a company of 2,000 people, obviously you can't have a relationship with every single person at this level, but you try and have this relationship with the teams and the people you most work closely with. And then you basically propagate this idea from top down. Freedom also comes at a cost. We say, yes, you have the freedom to actually do everything you want. Anything you want, you have. Like people say, who does the product planning for one of our products? We don't really have product planning. Like there isn't project management or product management as such in many of the products at JetBrains. When you use IntelliJ IDEA, there isn't someone that sits there and says, okay, in this release, we're going to have this, and this. No. Developers work on what they want, and then if it makes it into the release, it makes it into the release, and that's it. There isn't that level of product management. And developers have the freedom to do what they want. Well, developers and non-developers. But this also brings its consequences. So, a case study of working on fun stuff. Remember, work on what you want, work on fun stuff, and get stuff done. So right now, I look at something that I want to work on, which is a brand new feature that's come out, which is awesome, and I say, okay, does this feature add value? Are my users going to use this feature? Yes, it does, absolutely does. So it ticks the box, everything is great. Do I enjoy working on this new feature? Of course I do. It's way better than working on that stupid bug. I want to work on this cool feature. But do you start to think about it in the larger context? Whether in the larger context it actually adds value. Whether you working on the feature instead of that bug that's been open for a few years delays things. And not only delays things, but also can have an impact on other users, have an impact on other colleagues because they're relying on you. This is so easy to forget. And just say, oh no, but I really want to add this cool feature and I'm not going to work on this really boring thing, right? And I mean, there's a saying in Russian, I'll try, it's обещанного три года ждут, right? Like if a issue has been logged for 2 years or 3 years, it doesn't matter, we'll essentially get it done. And that is one of the consequences of what we have, which is kind of like a decentralized product management, which basically people kind of work on what they want. And sometimes you lose track, and it's not that people are evil, it's just that sometimes it's hard to look at that bigger picture because that's not your role. Your role is to work on specific things and do what you like. So what do you need for this kind of thing? You need to have a sense of self-organization. You need to have the discipline of saying, no, I know that this is really, really cool, but I got to get back and work on this. You need to be responsible, right? And you need to be able to communicate this information. You need to be able to say what you're working on. You need to be able to understand what's going on in the larger picture. But you also know how to prioritize. Because I've got a to-do list. Like no one joins JetBrains and they say, okay, here's your to-do list. You create your own to-do list. You define your own project plan. Whether you're a developer advocate, whether you're a developer, whether whatever you are, you create your own plan. So you need to know how to prioritize things. Passion, right? How do we hire people? We want passionate people. We just want people that are passionate. Passion can kill. Passion can blind you. Passion can lead you down the wrong path because you're so passionate you don't see the warning signs, the red flags. You need to know how to control your passions. And that's not always an easy thing to do. Knowing the importance of communicating. And remember how many times I keep saying the word communicate, because again, it's important. It is important to raise awareness of what you're doing. Tell people what you're doing, why you're doing it, not just do things. But I think the most important thing, and this is something that I question always myself, is question if what you're doing adds value. And that is not always easy. Because how do you know if what you're doing is adding value? If you're a company that is driven by KPIs or OKRs, it's quite simple, right? I'm a salesperson. I need to hit $30,000 sales this month. I hit $30,000, I'm doing well. But if you're not driven by KPIs, how do you know if what you're doing adds value? Take this talk, for example, right? How do I know if what I'm giving in this talk, the time that I'm spending here, preparing this talk, coming here, and giving this talk, adds any value to my goals at JetBrains and JetBrains as a company? We don't know, because there's some things that are hard to measure. And some of those things that are difficult to measure end up in a situation where the only thing that you can start to rely on is external feedback. And that is also a big issue. It's an issue at JetBrains. We try and get better at it, but we're not perfect at it, right? And when you talk about feedback, normally this is the hierarchy that you see in feedback. I'm the boss, I'm going to give you feedback. It's always one way. The boss gives feedback to the team member. It's never about the team member gives feedback to the boss. Nobody ever considers giving feedback to the team lead. Why should they? You know, you have one-on-ones, it's like, so I think you're doing quite well, blah, 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 blah. No one says, well, I think you really suck as a team lead. It doesn't happen, and it should, because feedback should go both ways. It should go top-down and bottom-up. It should. It's not just about top-down feedback. It's not just about boss to employee. But it's also about cross-team feedback and team feedback between team members as well, which again usually doesn't happen. You also have to provide feedback on a peer-to-peer basis. But giving feedback also is not easy, right? Normally, no one comes at, well, there are people that will come and say, I'm going to give you some really, really destructive feedback that's going to destroy you. Now, normally we say, hey, I'm going to give you some constructive feedback. This is shit, right? You have to measure your words. Trusting and caring, though, is also a two-way street. If I'm giving you trust, if I'm giving you freedom, if I'm caring for you, you're not caring for me back, you're not trusting me, it doesn't work. So that's not always easy to do. So if there's no management, is there leadership? Leadership is one of those words that I'm really allergic to. I hate the term leadership because it's so, it's just so hyped up and people talking about leadership and all of that. Let's call it bananas. What is bananas? It's about, I don't know what it is. What I've found, what I've learned through the time of being a team lead is about not trying to be a bottleneck, not being the person that everything has to go through. It's about learning to delegate. Now, learning to delegate is easy. I'll just hire more people and get them to do stuff. Except it's not that easy because a lot of times when you hire people and you get them to do stuff, you start to judge them as if you were doing it. And that's the hard part of delegating. It's not trying to get it exactly the way you would do it, but allowing people to be different, to think different, and to do it in a different way than you. I'm one of the worst people in the world to review text. When people give me a blog post or something to review, I rewrite it. I really suck at it. I'm really, really bad at this. And I keep having to hold myself back. Seeing the bigger picture. It's about not saying, okay, you're going to work on this today, but what about the impact that this is going to have in the longer term, and what about the impact it's going to have on the other type of work that you're doing? It's about knowing how to listen and be heard. And this, again, is difficult. Many of you here have partners, right? Partners, whatever, friends, close friends, brothers, sisters, whatever. Ever had an argument with them? Of course you have. Ever been in that argument and you've said something, and now it's their turn to speak, and all you're doing is just saying, just shut up because you're wrong. You're not listening. You're hearing them, but you're not listening. You're just waiting for them to shut up so that then you contradict what they're saying again as well. That's not easy to do. And it's about providing guidance. Guidance means feedback. It's about saying, okay, you've done good in this, you've done bad in that. And it's about being candid with that feedback. And it's about providing challenges. This is another problem as well. You know, if some person is always in the same role, doing the same thing, they start to get quite comfortable. And they'll think, well, they're doing a good job, they're happy, But it's no longer challenging either. And you need to start to challenge people. Sometimes you have to encourage people to do something that they can't accomplish or they think they can't accomplish. Not just say, well, they're doing well, let's just continue and let them. And more importantly, a lot of times when we talk about feedback, we focus on the people that are doing badly. We don't focus on the people that are doing well. You know, if you're running a team of 10 people and you're doing one-on-ones, you're like, okay, well, you know, this person is doing good, so I'll dedicate 10 minutes to them. This person has issues, so let's dedicate half a day to them. But it's wrong, because that person that's doing good deserves attention as well, deserves more attention, deserves to be challenged, deserves to be given new things to do. And this is something that so often people forget to do, including myself. And being candid, right? Being straight, not bullshitting people, not saying, yeah, it's great, yeah, it's not okay, oh, you're fired. But you've been telling me for the past 5 years I've been doing good. Yeah, sorry, it just didn't work out, right? Because it's so much easier to just say, yeah, everything is good. HR, can we fire this person, please? Then, no, look, you need to improve on this. Because otherwise, you're failing yourself, you're failing your team, and more importantly, you're failing that person, because you're leading that person to believe that everything that they're doing is great in their life. And one day, they'll leave that job and go to another one and fall flat on their face. So, is this leadership? I don't know. This is kind of the things that I've learned along the way and trying to improve on and learning every day. But this is isn't only about what team leads can do or not do. This is how each of us have to act as individuals. So all of this and the culture that we have, how do you try and keep it? This is a photo because we used to, when we were a little bit smaller, we used to go during the new year, right before Christmas, we used to gather all of the JetBrains employees and all of their families to a single location and have a celebration, right? This was in Finland. It was like, 3 trains of Russians coming into Finland. But this was the last time we all gathered as a company, because now we're so big that we can't anymore. Now we split it up into offices, and now basically the 2 days getting away and go skiing has now become essentially a dinner, because it's just way too big to try and do all of this. But this culture, a lot of people talk about keeping this culture. But there's an issue with this idea of constantly thinking about keeping the culture, right? But as the team grows, and we'll get to that, but as the team grows, and as some company size grows, you need to also understand different cultures. JetBrains was founded by 3 people in Czech Republic. There were 3 Russians. As it grew, there was a lot of more Russians joining. Then there was people from the Czech Republic. Then there was Americans. Then there was English. Then there was a whole bunch of different nationalities that are now part of JetBrains. And you have to take into account all of these different cultures. I'm sure many of you have seen this chart of what the British say, what the British mean, and what the rest of the world understands, right? This is very, 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 very accurate. Right? Like, for example, if a British person says that's not bad, what they mean is that it's very, very good, but what you understand is that it's quite bad, it's quite poor. Or, for example, very interesting. If anyone that is from the UK ever says to you that's very interesting, they're insulting you. Okay? They're saying that's bullshit, right? And it's actually funny because I've been at JetBrains for now 10 years, and about 6 months ago, I was having a talk with one of my colleagues, and we were having this discussion about the tooling aspect of the IDE for Kotlin, blah, 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 and I was sharing some opinions, and after the 1-hour meeting, he says to me, oh, Hadi, that was very interesting. Right? And I'm like, okay, bye. And then I call him afterwards, because there was like 5 people in the room, right? I call him afterwards and I'm like, Sasha, was that a waste of your time or something? He's like, no, why? I said, you said at the end it's very interesting. He's like, yes, because it was, right? It's still hard. Like, it's still, even for me that talks about this table, I kind of forget that, no, different things mean different things to different people. So this is something you need to take into account. Now, culture is infused. How do you promote this culture? You kind of infuse it, which is how? You basically lead by example, right? So, some of the things that we do, like when I first joined JetBrains, You know, I was hired for the role of a .NET developer advocate, and my closest colleague was the guy that hired me, essentially. And I used to start to look at things, and I would complain to him. Oh, this doesn't work. Oh, that doesn't work. Oh, this doesn't work. And he would be like, well, you know, go fix it, right? Like, don't sit around and expect things to be fixed. Fix them. Because I didn't realize that I can actually have permission to try and fix something. You know, I thought, no, my role is a developer advocate for a resharper, and that's what I have to do. And if there's some process or something broken, I will complain to my manager, and then my manager will complain to their manager. There isn't. And in JetBrains, you know, like the whole idea of complaining up the corporate ladder doesn't really work because there's not much of a ladder. You know, you take one step and you fall off. So you don't sit back and expect things to happen, you try and act, which goes back to, again, the issue that sometimes we end up having, which is, you know, like, let's say that we're working on onboarding new employees. So I start to work on onboarding new employees, and I start to write guides for people that are joining JetBrains, and then it turns out that someone else is doing the exact thing, and then there's another office doing the exact thing, and we don't even know that we're doing the exact thing. Because no one's going to say to me, Hadi, you shouldn't do working on this. If it adds value, if it's good, why shouldn't I? I don't need permission. And if I fail to communicate this, we end up with situations, as we often do. The other thing that people always talk about is it's very, very important to protect the culture. Like, you need to make sure that you do not destroy the culture. Because if you, like, one of the biggest things that this company has going for it is the culture. Yes, protecting the culture is fundamentally important. And there are cases where we have hired people that just did not fit the culture. And you can tell. But you have to be open to change. The worst thing that happened, in fact, today, just before I came here, we've hired a new person around events and marketing. And I was talking to them, and I said, you know, how do you measure events? Right? How do you measure the success of an event? We go to a conference and we exhibit there. How do you measure the success? And she said, well, I've been talking to some of the marketing managers to see, and already I'm like, oh, no, you shouldn't have. Because now you start to already be influenced by some of the things that they're saying. It's so easy to start making people part of the Borg, right? As they join, think the same way, do the same things. We have guides, like we have guides for developer advocacy. When you join, it's like, here's how we do developer advocacy. Here's how we do product marketing. Here's how we do this. Here's how we do that. It's great, but you have to also tell people to challenge what you're doing, right? So it's important to protect the culture, to have people that are nice, to have people that are not rude, to have all of these things, but it's also very important to be open to change and not just say to people, oh, we don't do it like that. Another thing that I also learned very, very bad that I used to do is someone would come to me with an idea and I would say, yeah, we tried that, we failed. And I realized that all I was doing is demotivating people from trying that. Instead of saying, yeah, we tried that, we failed, what I started to understand is I shouldn't say that. I should say, interesting idea. No, I don't mean in the British way. Let me rephrase. Cool idea. How do you think on implementing it? And then let them say, okay, this, and I'll say, okay, the reason I'm asking is because we did something similar in the past, and maybe you want to learn from these mistakes that we made. And that opens them up to the possibility of learning that we've tried this, the way we did it, it didn't work, but you open up people to new ideas, as opposed to, no, we've already tried that, it didn't work. It's very subtle, but these subtle things make a difference. And this is something that you always need to take into account. So protect your culture, but allow people to come in and change that culture. But in summary, if I were to say kind of like, you know, what characterizes the culture that we have at JetBrains and how we kind of try and do things and how we can get things done, I think that the two most important words here are basically trusting and caring people, right? And, you know, JetBrains now is, I've been at JetBrains for 10 years, touch wood. You didn't see that. I've been at JetBrains for 10 years. It's the longest I've ever been at a company. I still get up every morning, really excited to work in this company. The first employee of JetBrains after the 3 founders, Eugene Zhuralev, he's still an employee at JetBrains. Like, we have very, 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 very low staff turnover. And there must be a reason for that. Because it's not just about the job. It's about actually trusting people, giving them the freedom, and caring for them. Thank you. So we finished 10 minutes earlier. You can all go, right?
No. We still have questions for you. Not many. But there's a question about working on the fun stuff. So it's good, but what about the technical depth and the boring stuff? And do you know any people who actually love working on boring stuff?
Yes, and he left. No, I'm joking. Actually, yes, we recently, that's a good question. That's what I was trying to point to with regards to, you know, it's very easy to work on the fun stuff. It's harder to sometimes work on the boring stuff. And we do have people that work on not features, but
monotonous.
The same thing.
Same thing.
Boring things. But I always say, as developers, we shouldn't think of a bug as boring. It's a challenge. You know what's boring? And this is by no disrespect to any profession. But we are really, really fortunate in that in our profession, we get to do different things every day, even if it means that different thing is set a breakpoint on a different line, right? Because there are jobs that they have to do the same exact movement, same exact thing day after day after day. So when people say to me, oh, it's boring to work on performance or it's boring to work on bugs, it's not. It's a challenge. But we do have it. And we actually have marathons. For example, recently, you know, we had a marathon, which was the IntelliJ IDEA Performance Marathon, which a lot of people were getting together and working on making IntelliJ IDEA more performant. And by the way, if you haven't checked, can I do a little advertising segment? 20,019.3 is more performant than... Yeah.
Indeed.
There you go. He's backing me. Cover your logo.
All right. There is also a question about the tools you mentioned. So the bot, the Slack bot, whatever it is. Why do you consider the tracking tools as an alternative to the stand-ups? Why don't they complement each other?
I guess it depends what is the purpose of your stand-up. I don't generally find stand-ups productive. I find that we moved to weekly stand-ups where we log things in Confluence, and that allows us to basically see at a global picture what's going on, as opposed to daily telling people every day what I'm working on. So you can obviously do both, but I don't really see the need there.
Okay. So there is one tricky question for you. Are the salaries disclosed?
Are the salaries disclosed? I don't know. I'm not HR. Sorry. If you go to the booth, I think that Nikita from HR is here. Sorry, Nikita, to put you on the spot, but he can answer your questions.
Okay, I can probably answer as well. I don't know your salary, so.
I don't know your salary.
Okay.
There you go.
There's the answer. So that's basically it.
Okay, excellent.
We can probably go earlier and have some beers or whatever.
Yes, yes.
The after party is coming, and don't go yet. Don't go yet.
There's another set
there is an
there's someone else coming, and they've got 38
you
slides.
wanted to announce something. 10 minutes more. We don't have any questions. That's the...
Do you want to ask me questions how to say things in Russian?
Yes. What?
I don't know much Russian.
He does. I know.
No, I don't. I just know one thing, but it's very, very rude. And I'm not going to say it. Very rude.
All right. Maybe anyone has any more questions? Yeah, there is a question.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about your how the
all hands? Oh, you didn't mention any hackathons, actually. We have plenty of those.
Yes, what do you mean by all hands?
Like you mentioned that you have everything is open, people can ask any question, people can challenge any discussion, public or private. So can you a little bit elaborate how to make this
Could you repeat the question?
Yes. I'm just looking at your T-shirt and thinking I'm going to die because I'm not going to get fit. So, oh, okay. So, so the question is, how do you make the all hands kind of like productive in terms of enabling discussions? So we
Especially when the company grew from the couple hundreds to thousands.
yeah. So we like generally the internal conference that we have, there's like the keynote from the CEO, and the way that it's done a lot of times is that it's more kind of like an open floor question, right? So the CEO tells us a little bit about how things are going, blah blah blah, and then it's like 45 minutes of just ask me anything, like town hall things. And we generally try and keep it civilized. So there's no real issue. But it's not an all hands once a year thing, right? It's continuously encouraged that you always go and talk to anyone that you need to, whether it's senior management, whenever it is. And we have no real level of censorship. People ask about anything on the Slack channels, like literally anything. Like some things are just kind of like, why when I went to order coffee, the barista wasn't there? We need to solve this problem. That's a completely, as remote developers, we know they're very spoiled.
Yeah.
And then we also have like the hackathon yearly, which I don't know what's got to do with the all hands on, but anyway.
Okay.
Okay.
But you mentioned the breakfast.
What about the breakfast?
Yeah, there is a complementary question to that.
Oh.
So why don't we have dinners in the evenings?
They're actually, see, I'm saying that I always say that people that work in the office, they're so spoiled. They should work from home. Like,
They should try working at home.
Yeah, they should
Once
try
in a
working
while,
from home.
cooking for themselves. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, in the office, like, yeah, never mind. But I don't know, I think that, well, we provide breakfast and we provide lunch and then people put away their food for dinner. So, sorry. But you know why? Because we want you to leave the office and go home and have your life with your family and outside of the office. That's why.
Yeah. How do you reduce time spending on Slack?
How do you reduce time spending on Slack?
Switch off Slack.
Switch off Slack. Someone said to me when I was talking about like, switch off Slack or have these like timeout zones. Well, one of the things that I started doing was in my calendar, I would book 4-hour meetings, which weren't actually meetings, but it would block it so that it was just like me doing something. But I used to, maybe switch off Slack if you can. Someone said to me, okay, you can switch off Slack. How do you deal with people coming up to you at your table while you're working and you've got your headphones on, clearly kind of saying, I'm in the zone? And my response is, I've been working 20 years from home. That's how I avoid that. So.
I learned to ignore it.
Yeah. Or
I don't switch it off, but.
You ignore me as well, don't you?
Yeah. Didn't answer yesterday.
Yeah.
All right. Also, 20% project. Okay, we should
Yes,
wrap it up. No.
No,
I was
we're
making
done.
it up.
Okay, thank you very much.